Hey, what's up? It's Symphony here. Subscribe to my brother Mr. Creepy as Hell channel, and when you're watching his videos, make sure you stay in one piece.
Every time I buy something from the thrift store, I always have a priest to bless it, just to make sure the person who previously had it doesn't have any negative energy or maybe demonic entity attached to it. I know this is going to be weird, and I know a lot of you are probably really non-believers in that stuff, and I get it. I used to be a skeptic too, until I experienced something that happened to my grandmother that made me change my views about everything. A little backstory. My name is Williams, and I live with my grandmother, and I still do, and she's still alive and everything is okay. My mother died after giving birth to me, and I don't know who my father is. But this happened when I was 12 years old. It was a Sunday, and after we left church, me and my grandmother went to the thrift store. She always made that tradition on Sundays. Every time she'll leave church, she'll always go there, because every week they'll always have something new, and she loves shopping there. Sometimes we can be there up to about 3 hours. It really annoys me sometimes. When we got there, we looked around for a bit. I decided just to sit down because I really didn't feel like walking around the thrift store for a couple of hours or maybe possibly the whole rest of the day. About an hour later, my grandmother came up to me and asked me, "Hey William, let me ask you a question. What do you think of this statue right here? It's a very beautiful carving, and the way they designed it, I like it. It will go good with all my other collections of my statue. It's a really beautiful one." When I looked up, I was expecting to see some sort of angel statue, but instead, it looked like some dog, but maybe a monstrous creature. I couldn't describe it. It had little wings on it as well, and the eyes were orange. It creeped me out. I didn't tell my grandmother how I felt about it. I just agreed with her. "Oh yeah, it's a very nice statue." "Huh, appreciate it then. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and go now. I think I got what I want. I don't really need to look around for anything else." I was taken off guard. My grandmother was ready to leave the thrift store, and it hasn't even been 30 minutes, but I wasn't complaining. I got up and I went with her, and we left. But leaving out of that thrift store, I didn't know what awaited for me and my grandmother. I didn't know that our lives were about to change, and for the worse, all because of that statue. Actually, things started happening immediately when we got home. Later that night, after my grandmother cooked dinner for me and her, I noticed I heard my grandmother talking to herself. I couldn't hear what she was saying. It just sounded like she was just whispering, but it kind of made me a little bit unsettled. I walked up to my grandmother in her room and I asked her, Grandma, are you okay? I heard you talking to yourself. I just want to check on you. Are you doing all right?" "Oh, yeah, William, I'm doing okay. I just had a long day, and your grandma is just very tired. I'm gonna go off to bed, and you should go off to bed too. You gotta get ready for school in the morning," she said to me with a nervous laugh. I decided to leave her alone because I figured that maybe my grandmother just had a long day, and maybe she was just exhausted and tired. So, later on that night, at around 9:30, I went off to bed. I checked on my grandmother, and she was already asleep, so I figured that maybe she was just tired. I went in my room, and I fell off to sleep. "You're gonna die!" I almost fell off my bed. When I looked up and cut on the light, my grandmother's eyes were so wide open, it felt like they were gonna come out of her socket, and she was gritting her teeth like she was really angry. And then I saw her have her hands out, like she was trying to position them to choke me in my neck. I tried to calm my grandmother down, and I told her, Grandma, stop, what's going on? Grandma, stop! Hey, snap out of it, Grandma! Oh my God. I'm so sorry, William. I don't know what's going on. I just, I don't know what's happening. It's okay. You were probably just half asleep and you probably had a bad dream. Let me help you get back into your room, okay? I walked my grandma back into her room and I tucked her in and she fell right back to sleep. I didn't really know what to make of what just happened, but it freaked me out. The way that my grandmother looked at me, the way she had her hands out like she was about to kill me. I didn't know what was happening to her. That was not how she normally acts. The next couple of days, things only got weirder. Things like my grandmother would be sleeping in the bedroom and then I'd come find her on top of the ceiling. Yeah, I'm not even joking. Or another case where I would see my grandmother bend her body in an unnatural way while walking towards me. I got freaked out, and then she'll pass out and wake up and don't remember what happened. It got so bad that I had to talk to someone. I was concerned for my grandmother. I was wondering if maybe her mental health wasn't good or maybe she was declining. I was hoping that wasn't the case. I mean, in my opinion, she was still young. She was only about 59 years old. And she looked really healthy. And she took really good care of herself. So I was thinking that it couldn't be anything medical. I was thinking it had to have been something mentally wrong with her. I didn't know how to approach my grandmother about this, but I had to because I was concerned for her safety and mine. When my grandmother went to the doctor, they come to discover that she was actually in perfect condition. Her health was good. There was nothing wrong with her. So whatever was going on, it wasn't because something medically was wrong with her. That night, things took a turn for the worse. And when I mean by the worst, I mean really bad. That same night, my grandmother was making my dinner, and she seemed like she was alright. I was sitting down in my room playing video games when I heard the pot fell over. Immediately I paused my game to go downstairs to see if my grandmother was alright. And when I got in the kitchen, I saw something that was really horrifying. On the kitchen counter, my grandmother was on top of. She turned around and started growling at me. But when she growled, it felt like a different voice was coming out of her, and it wasn't her own. It sounded really scary. She was on the counter, crawling like some animal on all fours. She looked at me and turned her head to the side and continued to growl. I was petrified. I couldn't even move, even though my body was telling me to run. Then she hopped off the table, and I can hear her bones popping as she came closer to me. She looked at me and gave off that ear-piercing roar again. This time I was able to work up enough courage to run into my room and close it. What was I going to do? I thought to myself, I couldn't call 911 because they're not going to take me serious. And that's when I realized I did have a number that I could call, someone who can help my grandmother. I called up the priest at our church to come in and take a look at my grandmother because how she was acting was not normal. Now, like I said, I'm not a big believer in these type of things. Even though I go to church with my grandmother, I only go with her because I don't want her to be alone and she doesn't have anyone to go with. So I just go with her to keep her company. But in honesty, I didn't really believe in none of that stuff. After I got done calling the priest, I waited for him to come. Meanwhile, my grandmother started to act even more strange. She was screaming and she was crawling on all four. And once again, she started growling. This went on for several minutes. And even though the priest came in about 5 minutes, those 5 minutes felt like eternity. Finally, when the priest came in, he saw my grandmother. His eyes were wide open. Immediately, he called for other priests to join him because they had to tie my grandmother down in order for them to perform what they call an exorcism. I still was skeptical, but I let them do what they can to help my grandmother go back to normal. Eventually, all three of the priests were able to tie my grandmother on a couch and perform the exorcism. As they were performing the exorcism, I can hear my grandmother scream in a voice that wasn't hers, growl in a voice that wasn't hers, hiss, snarkle in a voice that wasn't hers. It was a scary ordeal that I had to go through. Finally, a few hours later, they were successfully able to exorcise the demon or whatever was possessing my grandmother out of her body. An hour later, my grandmother woke up, and she felt horrible about what happened. I really don't know what came over me. I'm so sorry, William. I'm so terribly sorry. I don't know what happened. Grandma, it's not your fault. You obviously were possessed by something. I don't know how, but you were possessed by something. A day later, the priests were able to do investigation on what may have caused my grandmother to get possessed. And behold, it was something from the thrift store. That statue of that weird looking dog. From what the priest said, someone had latched an evil spirit onto the statue. Something that was like a portal from this world and from the underworld. A couple of weeks later, my grandmother really recovered from being possessed, and I managed to get rid of that statue. She didn't want it in her house anymore. We still go thrift shopping to this day, as I'm 22 now, but anything that we get, we make sure to bless it. And I became more of a believer now after witnessing what happened to my grandmother. Like I said earlier in what I was telling you, if you ever get anything from the thrift store, just be very careful, because you'll never know if you're inviting an evil spirit into your place.